Hey there, it's me again, Marcus from horntools. Today I want to talk to you about winches. First of all, how do I find the right winch for me? How do I find the right rope for me? And afterwards, how do I use a winch properly? Of course, when it comes to winches, it all starts with the rope. All our winches come in two versions, always with either a synthetic rope or a steel cable. The common belief these days is that steel cable is basically no longer used, and that synthetic rope is the be-all and end-all. But that's not entirely true. It really depends on the area of use. Of course, it depends on what kind of terrain I'm in. What am I using my winch for? For example, in towing companies or whenever you're generally dealing with vehicles, you often come into contact with chemicals like gasoline, coolant, antifreeze, and so on. In those cases, the steel cable is, of course, unbeatable because chemicals don't affect the steel cable. Synthetic ropes, on the other hand, can definitely be damaged by them. Or, for example, in the field of fire departments or technical emergency services, temperature can play a role, where again the synthetic rope doesn't necessarily perform well and the steel cable is unbeatable. Then there's also the off-road sector, where a steel cable can make a lot of sense. For example, if I'm traveling through rough terrain, with sharp edges or rocky ground, that's where I can use the steel cable. Otherwise, the synthetic rope, which is actually what we sell and use ourselves in about 80 to 90% of cases, has the huge advantage of being lightweight. This is a tremendous benefit, especially when I have to hike up a mountain to find an anchor point. Also, if the winch is installed in the vehicle and uses a synthetic rope, the lighter weight naturally means the vehicle's handling is less affected. That's why both types of rope have their justification and, of course, their own areas of use. If you're now asking yourself, how do I find the right winch for my vehicle? There are several points you need to consider. First of all, of course, how heavy is my vehicle? Based on this number, I can determine which size of winch would be ideal for me. I say ideal because there are still other factors you naturally have to consider to see if it really fits your vehicle. But as a general rule, we always say that the winch should be able to pull 2.5 times the maximum permissible total weight of the vehicle, so that if I ever get really stuck in the mud, the winch can still pull me out even when I'm fully loaded on vacation. The next point, of course, is that the size of the winch also plays a role. Naturally, I could install the biggest winch available on the market in my car, if I have the space for it. However, that's exactly the problem that often, in the front area of the vehicle, I don't have enough space to install such a large winch. So I might have to see whether I need to install a smaller winch, or whether I can actually use a larger one. That's something you should always discuss specifically with your mechanic or with a vehicle builder, to see whether it will actually fit in your car or not. Or you can just check out our website. There, we already have ready-made installation systems for many different vehicles, which are, of course, TÜV approved and guaranteed to fit your vehicle perfectly. Next, of course, the pulling speed also plays a role. With this 4.3-ton winch, we have different versions when it comes to speed. In the standard version, the winch has a pulling speed of up to 6 meters per minute, and in the fast version, the quick version, which you can always recognize by the Q in the product name, we have a pulling speed of up to 16 meters per minute. This speed is especially important in the field of hunting winches, since we sell winches here with longer cables up to 80 meters. And you can imagine, with up to 80 meters of cable, it's really nice to have a somewhat higher pulling speed, because otherwise you end up spending quite a long time in the forest with the game before you've actually finished retrieving it. With the quick winches, our wireless remote control is also included as standard. However, this can also be retrofitted to all other winches. So, in other words, if I buy a regular winch and decide I still want a wireless remote control, I can order it as an optional extra. It can then be installed in the control box or connected externally, but I'll get into that later. A wired remote control is always included in the delivery, so even if the wireless remote runs out of battery, I can still operate my winch. We have a range of winches in our lineup, from 0.9 tons of pulling force up to 8 tons. Of course, these winches are also available in 12 and 24 volts, so you can install them in trucks or cars.